like, subscribe, comment, whatever.
I'm really a guy who lives out in the woods. Don't have any of those special fancy titles. But I am a father, and I want my children to live in a Christian nation. And I want my children to live in a Christian nation.
Well, welcome to the Lone Bulwark. I'm Stephen Wolfe. I'm trying a little bit different setting today. I thought this would be nice to kind of get comfortable and just talk. And so thanks for joining. Today I am going to talk about, I guess, a controversial topic, apparently. It's going to be on theonomy. Very exciting. And some of the ways to distinguish myself from theonomy. I was talking to a friend the other day, and but he's actually a theonomist. I think he'd say he's a general equity theonomist. And it was about an event where we might do some kind of debate or speak about this issue in some way together or with others. And I was thinking about that framing. Is it theonomy versus natural law? Now, a lot of theonomists say that they affirm natural law. I think Doug Wilson has said that he affirms natural law. I've heard like Toby Sumpner said that he affirms natural law. And so it's interesting. So I don't know if it's the framing of that is exactly right. If I represent the natural law side, but there is, I think there are differences. But in particular, if you talk about theonomy, there's a certain branch of theonomy which may be more of a purist theonomy, I suppose. General equity, I guess, can be a little looser in how they do law, I suppose. But the probably the purist type of theonomy is I think that's what I'm going to end up debating against. So I wanted to have some preliminary thoughts as I think through how to approach this topic a bit. And is it really accurate to say that, Stephen Wolfe has the theonomic or has the natural law position? If that's the right framing. And as I was thinking about this, I'm thinking that the right framing, like the two sides, it seems to me that the two sides are, it's theonomy, again, of the purest sort. I know there's like different versions of it. But on the other side is politics. So it's politics versus theonomy. I know that might surprise and probably offend a few people, but I think that is the difference. It's politics versus theonomy. And I think that at least the purest form of theonomy is an escape from politics. Or to put it differently, it's essentially to eliminate politics. Now, as you move further away from the purist, I'd say that there is an entrance of politics. But at the same time, I think there still is, even among sort of the moderate theonomists, a tendency to escape politics. So what do I mean by politics? Let me begin by that. So the first thing is, politics is decision. That's what it is. It's a matter of decision. What do I mean by decision? What I mean is that the people, either themselves in like a pure democracy or referendums, but or the legislature, the representatives who represent those people, they deliberate upon something and they make a decision, and that decision is legislation. That decision is law. Law says do this or don't do that, and then it's usually accompanied with that would be some sanction, some punishment, some fine, or whatever it is. But it's a matter of decision. Because in politics and political animal, we being political animals, we look upon our society and we want to engage that society with ideas and with identifying problems, identifying evils, identifying what is good, and goods that we should seek, and then asserting that, that identification, and then from there, try to find means to attain that, try to find means for that to obtain within society. And that's politics, broadly speaking. It's a matter of deliberation and then fundamentally of decision. Ordinarily, it's a decision of a legislature, It can also be an executive if they've been empowered by the legislature to do certain things within a certain limited scope. That would also be a matter of decision. I guess adjudication and judicial branch would also be decision. But primarily, that's what politics is. It's the people themselves deliberating in public discourse about the good, about what is evil, and then the means to obtain the good and suppress or eliminate the evil. That's just I mean and the object of it is your political life as a community in society. So it's you centered on yourselves, trying to obtain the good for your people. So that's politics. That's how politics has always been understood since the very beginning of human society. Aristotle was right when he said that a man is a political animal, meaning that as a not an animal, not people misunderstand. He didn't mean that it's like they're ferocious and they're like ferocious political people. No, it just means that the sort of creature that man is a political being, which means more. Again, it means more than just being in a society with others. It means that you, as a member of that society, engage that society in discourse that hopefully in the discourse, what arises from that discourse is the good of that society. That's what politics is. That's what it's always been, as a matter of decision after deliberation. Now, on the more pure theonomic side, I recently came across this term called non-legislative theonomy, which means there's no legislation. There is no, which means there'd be no legislature because they'd have nothing to do. And so there'd be no creation of law at all. And in fact, this would render the magistrate or the civil government merely as sort of, at best, a type of delegate from God to enact the laws from the Bible, or at least to apply the laws. It's not even clear that there is an enactment or a promulgation, because the laws have already been enacted and promulgated via Scripture. So you don't even, in that sense, you don't need a clear executive. Or if there is the executive has a sort of, at best, like a sort of police force, but not an enforcer, not an enactor, not an executor of laws, apart from the police force side, I suppose. But when I hear some of them talk, it's not even clear that there would be an executive. It would be that there's some sort of injustice or evil occur in society, and then the two parties that are a subject, or that were where the injustice occurred between, or the alleged, would then go before a judge, and the judge would adjudicate based upon Scripture on that case, and that's it. And it would have to be a specific evil prohibited, which would be an injustice to be rectified through judgment. So it's not even clear that there would be an executive who would bring or force one party to be adjudicated. Or perhaps the judge himself would be the executive, and there would be executive judicial combination. Something it's not really clear to me, but from what I can tell, the political system or the governmental system would lack entirely a legislative unit. Now, this means, so on my side, I would say that the civil government, in a way, mediates divine rule. Now, that doesn't mean they mediate salvation as Christ does. It means that they have the power to enact law, to promote the good, and to suppress evil. And in that way, they're a sort of mediator in that they have lawmaking authority. That's really all I mean by that, as a sort of mediator. If you have distinguish this from like a minister. Ministers in church don't have a lawmaking authority. What they have is they take the laws of Christ that apply to the ecclesial or ecclesiastical sphere, and they apply those. That they're not allowed to come up with their own ceremonies, their own rituals. They have some governmental aspects where they can set rules and policies. For example, if there's, I don't know, my church recently said that the foyer, something about watching your kids so they don't hit this and break that, or something like that. I mean, so they can apply rules like that, but they can't establish rules that pertain essentially to an ecclesiastical body. Okay. So that's different than a civil authority, which in my view would have a mediating authority such that they can create law. Now, they can create law only if it's derived from the natural law or the moral law, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But if you distinguish all of that from theonomy, there's no legislature. It's not a clear system of executive with judicial, and they have no lawmaking authority at all. Now, this is what leads to a lot of theonomists to be extremely libertarian. And I think there's a lot of problems with that. First of all, that's never actually happened. There have been in ancient Greece, there have been lawmakers such as Solon who would establish laws for Athens and then say, I'm going to be gone for 10 or 20 years. I'm going to go to Egypt. And he, apparently did. And there's you can read Herodotus on his interactions with Pharaoh and all that. But Solon leaves. He says, "Do not change the laws. I declare you do not change the laws," and all that. So there have been kind of examples of that. Of course, eventually Athens did change their laws, and Lycurgus and Sparta had something similar. But nevertheless, for the most part, there's always been some kind of civil authority with legislative power to enact laws in all societies. And the reason for that, the very basic practical reason for that, is that some laws become unnecessary over time. Some laws that were just at one point become unjust later, given different circumstances. And so you need flexibility in the laws, and everyone's kind of recognized this. And this should become more apparent when you think about what politics does in relation to acting upon society. So you can have things that are kind of bad but not evil in society. You can have things that are evil, and you can have things that are good but not obtained, or things that are good that they want to seek in society. So let's just take the idea of a bad but not evil. One of those would be take fishing out on the ocean. So in many places there are fishing regulations that the U.S. Coast Guard will regulate because if it's overfished, it will kill the life cycle of the fish. And of course, this is driven by experts on on marine biology and all that. And so the way to understand this is that individual fishermen are just trying to find fish so they can sell in the market. So the individual fishermen are not doing anything wrong. It's just that there's too many fishermen. And so you can have something where the parts are good, but overall the collective action is evil or it's bad, because the whole of something can be bad and the parts can be different. So it's interesting, but each person is not committing evil, but overall they're committing a bad by essentially eliminating the fish to the point that they don't have the life cycle, and it'll essentially kill the fishing for many, many years after that. And so what you do, well, you identify a problem, and you seek through politics, through the legislature, to then enact laws that would secure the good in that. The good would be that there's fish that can be acquired and sold on market, but it's not overfished such that it eliminates that good. And so you have a regulation, whether it's fishing licenses, to catch limits, to perhaps the sort of equipment they're allowed to use. The same thing is that's why Fish and Game would regulate lakes and other things, because people overfish. Let's say there's a recreational use of a lake, and it's overfished, which that basically kills the recreational value of the lake. And that's why we have laws related to fishing licenses and fish lengths, precisely to maintain the population of the fish, to maintain the good of recreation. And if those things were not there, then they'd be overfished, and people would take the small fish, and then they would go, get a bunch of small fish, and that would equal one fish, right, to cook it up, or whatever it is. And that's why you regulate that, for the good. Now, individual people fishing, I mean, there's nothing wrong in itself from taking a smaller fish, if that's what you want to do. But because of the collective action of people doing that thing, it eliminates the good of recreation for the lake. And so we regulate it. That's a problem identified. Now, we wouldn't need that law if there were few fishermen, or if it's in a lake that's very remote. I've been to remote lakes in Yosemite, and I think they still actually have length requirements, even in Yosemite. But many of those laws don't really matter, because few people get up to these high off trail lakes that my father and I went to many years ago. It was a lot of fun. And so you wouldn't even need laws in those cases. In some ways, those laws might be bad laws because there's plenty of fish, and why couldn't someone catch a smaller fish? Anyway, so you get what I mean there. And then, of course, there's evil actions. If there is a if there's a people who are breaking into cars, which is already illegal, and they're stealing cars, you might need to apply a law, a stricter law, because now there's a problem of evil occurring. And now you need a law to maybe buttress the law that's already in existence or change the punishment or whatever it is. In that case, perhaps maybe you just need different policing tactics, which wouldn't be a law. But you get the example where in that case, a problem arose in circumstances, and now you need to apply a stricter law to that situation. And this could be for any number of evils that arise in society. Take how technology changes, and so now you have access to things on the internet, and so that would then need to be the laws would have to be adjusted for the change of circumstances. And then there's also the promotion of good. This is probably even among moderate theonomists controversial, but there's also the promotion of what is good, which I think having, say, a having a law of what side of the road you drive on is one example. You have an example of it's a collective action problem. I want to go from point A to point B. You want to get from point C to D. We cross paths in the process. You and I could want the best for each other. We could have no. We could as best we can try to avoid hindering your movement. And yet, if you have 1,000 people doing all that from different starting points to different endpoints, you need some sort of collective coordination for that to occur. And so the reason why in our streets and most places in America, why people obey the speed limit or obey the various traffic laws is that it facilitates our collective activity. If no one obeyed it, or if there were no laws, then we would be in a traffic jam. You've all seen videos or pictures of a third world traffic jam where there might be laws, but no one's committed to obeying the laws. But anyway, that's seeking to solve a collective action problem. You have other things like septic systems. I live out in the country, and there's permits. If you're going to dig a well, you have to get a permit. I mean, that's different from a septic. But if you're going to dig a septic system, it's also a well. So, well, I should talk about that first. So for like a well, there's a water table. You could buy a place. A developer could with goodwill develop houses in this area, but there's no city or county water to that place, so they have to dig a bunch of wells. They might be very meaningful. They might think there's plenty of water in the ground, but they just don't know. And so they build houses with wells, and eventually no one has water, or there's a water shortage for everyone in the entire area because this guy, as well-intentioned as he was, built 100 houses in a 100-acre lot or 50 acres, whatever it was, and sucked the ground dry from water. And that's why you'd have a county ordinance, and that county ordinance would say that you have to have, or that they would regulate the consumption of water, and that probably would mean like the size of the lot you can build, or perhaps whatever it is. But there would be regulations and permits associated with that to ensure the good that everyone has water. So with septics, you could be well-intentioned and say, look, I'm going to put my septic here. The leach field's out there. It doesn't affect anyone. That's not adjacent to another property or another house, or it's downhill away from everyone. Yeah, and you think you might be well-intentioned, but you just and the average person might say, yeah, that's a good spot for a septic. But it could be there's things that you just don't know. That actually right there, did you know there's underground water, whatever it is, and this water will go into this, and this will affect the people downstream. Or if, hey, there's a creek here, and if we build 1,000 houses right here, and there's no county water, then guess what? You're going to have to, that sewage is going to have to go somewhere, and it's going to go into the water system. It's going to have this and that. And you just don't know it. And so you have people who do public administration who know these things, whom we put public trust in, and we hope that they as administrators would do the job. And generally speaking, people do their jobs, at least in the United States. I mean, we can highlight all the corruption, fraud, but there's a lot of officials at the county level who do their job well, at the city level who do their job well, and this is regardless of politics. And so I think that we just don't recognize how much of our lives and have been regulated by the government, and actually some of that has actually been good. And it's local, so it's town, county, and state. They are doing these things. And so anyway, there's these problems that politics identifies. Politics is identify a problem, deliberate upon it, and enact the best possible good or law that you can to obtain the good. I don't know how theonomy, the purest form of theonomy, can do that. I don't know how it can deal with one, collective action problems. I don't see how it can do things like speed limits. From what I mean, part of it too is that you can only, like, theonomy would only attack acts of evil that are evil in themselves. Okay, so things that in themselves are non-evil cannot be regulated. So, and you cannot actually be punished until you commit an injustice itself. That's unjust in itself, which means you can't have speed limits. If you do a speed limit and you give a guy a ticket, there's nothing wrong with you going in itself, with you going 60 and a 40 in a place that was once 40 miles per hour until the theonomist showed up. There's nothing in itself wrong with doing the 60 miles per hour until you maybe hit someone or hit another car or whatever it is. And so you have to wait until someone hits a kid or someone hits a dog or someone hits another car or whatever it is, someone hits a house or whatever, before you can actually act against that person, which means that everyone can drive as fast as they want. Again, all the traffic regulations that facilitate our movement from place to place have to be thrown out. I don't know how they deal with like different ideas of sewage systems, of lakes overfishing. Would they prevent a guy in a river from using a net to catch fish? Most places that's illegal. And why? Because let's say there's salmon coming up the river. I don't think it's wrong in itself to use a net to catch fish, but that could lead to the destruction of the salmon population because that's how they go up to spawn. That's how they repopulate. Would that be against the law? Could you find a way? And also, who can you identify the clear victim there? Like, who's that individual victim? Can there be a class action where it's like the whole community now is a victim and therefore they're a party to the case? I guess perhaps you could do that. But is the act in itself an act of evil to use a net? Let's say the guy used a net once, he gets a few hundred fish, and it doesn't actually affect the rest of the population. It actually he was able to sell a few hundred fish. That doesn't seem evil in itself because the salmon can still keep populating. Now, if 100 guys do it, they follow, hey, look what this guy did. Another 100 guys do it. Well, each individual case is fine because it's okay for a guy in itself to go use a bunch of nets to catch a bunch of fish. But if 100 or 150, 200, 500 people do it, they eliminate all the salmon. Well, who committed the evil? Well, collectively they did. Okay, are you going to try all of them? Can you try a collective group of people who at the individual level did not actually commit an injustice in itself? So these are the various problems. And also the other problem is, and I could just go on and on with examples about that. And the other problem is that it eliminates politics. It eliminates people observing their community, engaging in deliberation upon the good. It eliminates all that. It eliminates decision. It also eliminates the ability to deal with circumstances. So let me focus on that. Yeah. So it eliminates politics as decision because it reduces all of governmental action to judging based upon the law book of the Old Testament or of the Bible in application of specific cases brought before a judge. So again, there's no legislature. It's not clear to me that there's an executive. There's only a sort of adjudication of the law already established. Yeah. And so it eliminates politics entirely. All there is just a judicial decision by judges. The other issue with judges, who appoints a judge? Are they voted in office? How long is their term in office? Is it for life? Where is his jurisdiction? Is the jurisdiction from here to here, can you establish jurisdictions in a theonomic system? Isn't that establishing a law? Say this is your jurisdiction, you cannot violate it. What are the terms of him being removed? There's all these issues that if you cannot legislate, you can't even enact your own system. It's self-contradictory. The purest form of theonomy is self-contradictory. It cannot establish its own system because it can't provide the rules and regulations surrounding its own functions. You can't adjudicate because you have no actual way to establish a judge. If you're going to establish if you're going to install an individual into a judgeship, then how long is his term? Is it for life? How do you remove him? What's a process to remove him? What's the adjudicative process? Is there a checks and balances? Is there a court of appeals? Is there a Supreme Court? Let's say there's one district. Let's say somehow you come up with a way to make districts. You have one judicial district determines this. Let's say it's like a dispute between this county and that county because of water. This county wants to build a dam. This county doesn't want you to build a dam because it's going to affect something about their river because the river passes through there. Okay. This judge over here says it's good. This judge says over here it's not good. So you can't do it. Okay. Or so who's going to adjudicate between those two districts if it affects that? Is there a Supreme Court that can then hear appeals? What if different courts disagree on the same basic matter? What if it's the same issue and two judges disagree? Is there a Supreme Court that will decide between them? So there's all sorts of problems. It sounds simple, it's nice, so the government's not going to tax you, the government's not going to be in your business. But you can't actually produce a system. You can't have a functioning system because you can't build the rules and regulations that permit it to function at all. And that's why you need to go back to politics. Politics, again, I mean, Calvin says this in one of his commentaries, like, yeah, liberty is good. Like having a Republican form of government is a good thing. And yet some people need monarchies. Sometimes you need other political forms, other political systems. This is what the founders believed too, is that America can do a sort of experiment in liberty because of their unique circumstances of self-government, their history of self-government, the fact that they came over from ships and they established in the wilderness their towns and they had town covenants, and they had a tradition and a political life of self-determination, of self-government. They were prepared for it and they were ready for it. And that's why America has been successful for a long time, or was for a long time. There was that flexibility because the circumstances, the nature of the people permitted them to be to function in a sort of what you want to call classical liberal model. Other places need monarchy. Other places want monarchy. Other places like the idea that you'd have a stable hereditary monarchy where it passes from one person to the other. That's their constitution. That's what they want. They've developed a constitution over time. Just take like England, how it's developed its constitution in relation to the king and parliament and their other their judges. They've developed a constitution over time. We have as well. This is another thing about that the purist theonomists can't deal with, is they can't. There's no constitution. There's no clear political system of rules, checks and balances, of different political bodies having different functions. In the U.S. Constitution, you look at Article 1, 2, and 3, and the first line says the legislative power will be invested or divested in Congress, and then the executive in the presidency, and then the judicial in the judicial branch. And so they determined constitutionally you have three functions of government. All three functions theoretically could be placed on one person. But the founders said, you got these basic functions: lawmaking, law executing, and law adjudicating. We're going to separate them into three different branches of government, and they're going to have checks and balances among each other. And that is constitutionally, from experience, how we were going to order ourselves. Now, If you look at, if you on the matter of the U.S. Constitution, is a clear example of politics. We have the notes from the framing convention that produced the U.S. Constitution. James Madison was there, and probably his scribe was writing all the various speeches from the different people, and some of them are summarized, but we get a general feel for what they were talking about. And they never quoted scripture or theology or anything like that. Now, I'm not saying that's good that they never did. I do think it was a mistake that they didn't put Christ in the Constitution. So I'll say that was a mistake. But their deliberations was good in this sense, that it was based upon not even like abstract philosophy. It wasn't based upon theology. It was mainly based upon assumptions about human nature connected with the political experience of the ages. So they would reference Rome. They would reference the Swiss Federation. They would reference political theorists such as Montesquieu. They would reference the British Constitution. They would reference all these things as, hey, what's worked given the collective experience of humanity, and what will work for us as our own people, because they're dealing with separate colonies, but they want a more robust, national central government. So what is going to work given the collective experience of mankind plus our own individual circumstances? And that's how we got the Constitution. It's a very good example of how politics works. You identify some good given the circumstances, and then you figure out how do we constitute, or what are the means for that? And in this case, what sort of arrangements are we going to have for our political system that guarantees that we don't slide into tyranny and that we properly serve the good and the liberty of the people of the United States? Okay, that was a good example of politics, but theonomists can't do that. I would also argue that it's a violation of just of human nature itself. Yeah, kidding. It's a violation of human nature itself that to eliminate the good of the good of deliberation and deciding upon the good of the people. I think in ancient Israel, they of course had the laws of God. But are you telling me there weren't rules in the various tribes, that they didn't have some sort of process of saying do this or don't do that? They don't have a set of customs. They don't have customs that would distinguish them from other people. And that's to bring up custom. That's another issue. Traditionally, political theorists have identified, or they've distinguished between law, and they've distinguished between that and custom. Law is explicit, it's clear, it's direct, it's in your face, it's promulgated, it's in a law book, and you know what's right and what's wrong. Custom is something that's developed over time, sometimes apart from memory. You don't know when this arose, you just know that we do this here. It's implicit, it's usually you're socialized into it, and it has a tremendous effect on the socialization and the collective life of a people. It's basically what distinguishes you from other people. And it takes on the form of a law. Now, theonomists, they can't have custom, because custom itself takes on a certain properties of a law, namely that we, the people, expect our fellow members to do this sort of practice. This is good manners. This is these are bad manners. This is how we communicate. This is how we speak. This is our language. This is how we greet one another. This is the sort of how we act in certain places. So in a restaurant, we act a certain way. In a library, we act a certain way. In a church, we act a certain way. In a playground, we act a certain way. In a ball field, we act a certain way. All these collective customs and traditions, and just broadly speaking, a way of life, the people can't have any sort of implicit demand upon those people to conform to a way of life. So for a theonomist, then you can't even have a way of life. Your way of life is nothing but thou shalt not do these evils. And that's it. You don't have a collective set of practices that distinguishes you from anyone else. So if we had a world of just pure theonomic states, which I do wonder how you'd establish borders. For a theonomist, it would be bad if there were differences between them, because differences between nations are expectations. Again, they're quasi laws. That's that's what, that they're implicit, they're implicit demands that people act a certain way. Can't have it. The other thing would be, how do you do with international relations if you don't have lawmaking authority? Let's say China wants to dump cheap goods and destroy your industry. They want to destroy your industry. What are you going to do about that? Do you have the lawmaking authority to enact tariffs? Do you have any sort of authority to act internationally at all? Who's the head of state who's going to negotiate and have treaties and have international relations with other peoples and other places? Is that person elected? If he's elected, how long is he in office? How do you remove him if he's bad? What do you do? The problems go on and on and on. If you escape from politics entirely, you can't deal with reality. You can't deal with the way things are in the world. You can't have international relations. And also, it means you can't even have treaties, because a treaty itself functions as law for you. It's not just the law between nations. It functions as a law for the nation itself. That is why in our US Constitution, the president can negotiate treaties. He can agree to treaties himself, but only becomes an established treaty after the Senate approves it. And there's a good reason for that, because it functions in a way as a law. It can actually limit. This is one of the ways, like, people criticize Obama and others for trying to enact environmental regulations through treaty. So anyway, that's a different thing. But yeah, so you can't even make treaties, or if you can make treaties, well, no, because let's say you have your treaty is an alliance, and it's a defense alliance. So we get a defense alliance with say Canada, and a defense alliance means that if Canada is attacked, then it functions as if they're attacking us. Okay, they're not attacking us, but the effect is they're attacking all of us. You attack one, you attack all. Can theonomists go into a treaty like that? Because you're establishing a U.S. law that says that if Canada is attacked, the U.S. then is bound by treaty/law to act as if they were the ones attacked, but they weren't attacked. So can theonomists have basic treaties, collective defense treaties? I just don't know how. I frankly don't. It makes me think like that a lot of theonomists, they haven't studied. They've studied the Bible. I'm not doubting that they love the Bible, but have they considered the full array of politics? Have they considered the comprehensive nature of politics, not only the various domestic issues, which is enough, I think, to defeat the idea, but the international issues? I don't know how, frankly, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how, I don't know how, I would love to hear, like, a theonomist give an account of international relations in a theonomic state. Now, what I suspect people could do then in response, and I think someone like James White would do this, is that they would do a form of a Jesus juke. But let's putting that aside. What they would do is say, okay, yeah, fine, Wolfe. Yeah, those all sound like problems. But what we're talking about is the post-millennial hope. we're talking about the post-millennial hope. As the nations Christianize, everything becomes better. In a way, human nature becomes better because everyone's Christian and we're all being sanctified. And so all those problems, Wolfe, that you're identifying, they'll just go away. There won't be problems anymore. You won't need defense alliances anyway. You won't need treaties. That's the move. I've seen this. It's like whenever theonomists who are post-mill get stuck, whenever they get stuck with an obvious practical, even theoretical, I'd say, problem with their theonomy, they jump to postmillennialism. It's a way to essentially escape reality. It's a way to escape politics now and to place it in the realm of essentially the promises of providence, which really means that you can't do politics now until there's a massive revival, until there's like obvious that the kingdom is here. You can't actually do comprehensive politics at all. You can't participate at all. You would show up. I mean, it's like if you're suddenly elected miraculously to a city council or a county commission, and all of a sudden this commissioner refuses to even talk about zoning laws, water issues, sewage and septic, business regulations, anything, because you don't think that any of this matters, or that doesn't matter. It'd be unjust for you to enact or participate, and all you do is just say all this stuff is wrong. We should just take this as the Bible. You're useless in politics. Literally, no one in history they'd all think that you're crazy, and no one would actually take you seriously. You wouldn't get elected in the first place. And so in the end, the post-mill theonomic politics, not all, I keep saying, this is not everyone, okay? It's not everyone. But for a lot of people, it's not just that it's an escape from politics. You can't be political now. All you can be is a guy who theorizes about what the future theonomic state will be like. Because for you to participate is for you to participate in what you think is evil. Now, you might admit that, yeah, that zoning regulation, that seems on its face, that seems to make sense. Like, it makes sense that people in the country don't want a huge warehouse across the street that could likely fail and leave just a ghost warehouse for years with a ugly barbed wire fencing and all this stuff. That makes sense. Maybe we should vote for that, against that plan, because it seems really dumb and it seems like it would be bad for the people there. But you can't do that because, one, you probably don't believe in zoning regulations in the first place. And also, you don't believe in the very idea of voting for a new law at all. I guess perhaps you could say I'll vote no. But if you vote no, you're consenting to the process, which is to have a legislative body. It's also weird. You can't even join the legislature because you don't believe in legislation. So you can't be a part of the city council. You can't be a part of the county commissioner. You can't become a state legislature. You can't, certainly not at national level. You can't do any of that. I do wonder too about some theonomists, what they think about if you are most, I wonder if like someone like Durbin and James White are non-legislative theonomists. Because if you are non-legislative theonomists, then do you believe that the states should ban abortion? Because that would be the creation of a law, right? Or I mean, I guess perhaps you can get around it and say, well, what they're actually doing is they're enacting a biblical law. I guess you could say that, but that's weird. Even though they're not really doing that, their source of that law would be the law book of the state or of the federal government. It wouldn't be the source of it. Wouldn't be the Bible. They'd have executive of the law. They have public administration. They'd have police force. They'd put people in jail, which you may not agree with at all. Yeah, it's a whole different issue. I could go on and on. I could go on and on about this. The point is, okay, let me finish this up, I guess, with the discussion about natural law, because I started off in natural law. To kind of clear it up, when I say I believe in natural law, that does not mean that what I want to do is be nothing with me and my computer in my office reflecting on the natural law and come up with a bunch of laws. That's not at all what I mean. That's not what anyone has ever meant. What they mean is that, one, that in order to make a civil law just, it has to be rooted in some sense in the natural law, or the moral law. And so in order for it to be a law at all, it has to essentially be derivative of the natural law. It can be enacted as civil law. It can, and because the natural law is basically a set of principles with ends for mankind, and the civil law is a means in political life to lead or direct, or to bring about the good in the purview of civil political life. That's the idea. Um, but in creating a law, if you identify a problem in society, whether it's bad, good, or you want to promote some good, you have three things. One, you can reflect through reason on what is good, what is human nature, and you can try to enact that way. You can also apply just basic experience. Hey, the town over did this and it worked. The town over there did that, and it actually failed. You do things like that. Or hey, you know what? Most nations for most of history had this, like, had a blasphemy law, or they had laws against homosexuality, or whatever. That most people had this, or whatever you want it to be. And also the third one is scripture as well. So in deciding upon a law, you can use your own reason, you can use experience, and you can use scripture. And experience could be everything. It could be simply, hey, we have a problem with the quality of water in our town. We need to contact some consultant who knows how to fix the water in our town. And you contact the consultant, and it's funded through the county. And the consultant says, you need to do this. And the county says, oh, that makes sense. And it's not too expensive. We'll do that. And the water improves. Or, hey, we got an issue with sewage, or we have a growing population. We need to get water to these people. Where are we going to get water? You don't need scripture. Scripture is not going to tell you where to get water. If you're in the middle of central North Carolina, you can't open scripture to find out where you're going to find water. You find the water, and then you determine how to get that water from the water source to the people. And that does not involve even natural law thinking. That just is a technical issue. I mean, then it deals with some property rights, eminent domain, other issues that come up. But none of that is some grand scriptural application. It's just you, through your own reasoning, thinking process, identifying a problem and then enacting the solution to it. And that's how most government issues happen. That's how most government issues are handled, especially at the local and the state and even the federal level. Most of the things that our various legislative bodies do is incredibly boring. It's boring. It's dealing with real issues, but it's dealing with technicalities that can bring about some good once they identify some bad, evil, or the absence of good, I guess. Anyway, that's what that is. Just like in life, we think, let's say we want to go from our house and we want to get down to the gym downtown somewhere. And we hear that this road is closed. And we realize the ordinary means to seek my end is to go down that road, but it's closed because they're fixing the road. Well, we deliberate and think, I guess I could go this way or that way, this way, and we decide upon the best route, usually what's the most efficient route to get to the location. Didn't require scripture. It just required basic experience and application of basic common sense, and we get that. A lot of government legislation is nothing but that. You don't need a chapter and verse to figure out how to figure out a second route to the gym. Same thing with legislation. Identify a problem and fix it. So, all right, I've been talking for, I guess it's been about an hour. So that's my take on theonomy. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of responses and some hate. Let me just say, I'm not condemning anyone. I consider them Christian brothers. I have disagreements. I think in a lot of matters, we're on the same side and we can work together. I've tried with maybe a couple failures. I've tried to be very friendly with theonomists when it pertains to theonomy. And I have to say that I think I've received more hate than I've actually dished out. But at the same time, I think theonomy, as a practical matter, has several different problems, from politics to its own internal consistency to its application in society, and it denies the basic demands of the world we live in today, and has a sort of radical libertarianism that would actually be very destructive and bad. And there's a reason why it's never happened. But if people they can always appeal to the post-mill hope, as James White and others would do. Anyway, I'll end it there. I hope this was recorded well and the sound's good because I'm just sitting here with my cat. I didn't plan the cat to be here. This is Stormy, by the way. Stormy. My 6-year-old said Stormy, and we're like, okay. And I was the only one who thought Stormy. Okay. Anyway, I'll get to that, but no one else knew about that, so I'm not going to bring it up. But yeah. All right. So thank you very much. Yeah, like, subscribe, comment, whatever. Have a great day.